Artists, now that we have drawn our composition of our chameleon, remember that our next step is to trace over top of our pencil lines with an ultra fine point Sharpie. You'll notice that when I was doing my tree branches, I added some texture in the lines to help my tree look more realistic. Before we start painting our background, we need to go back in and erase any pencil lines that we still see from tracing with our Sharpie. Before you start painting your background, make sure that you have used your Sharpie to write your name in the lower right hand corner. If you don't want to put your code on the front of your paper, please flip it over and put it on the back. Just make sure that your class code is somewhere on your paper. We're going to be painting our project in two parts. The first day, we're going to be doing the background, and the second day, we're going to be doing the chameleon. And the reason why we need to do this in two separate steps is that we need our background to completely dry before we do our chameleon, because we're going to do two different watercolor techniques on our project. The first technique is called a wet on dry. So we're going to have dry paper and we're going to use wet paint. So watercolors come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but they are all used the same way. You're going to need water, you're going to need your watercolor, and a brush. So for step one, we are not going to paint anything on our chameleon. We are just going to focus on our background. To activate watercolor, you need to use water. So we've got a sponge with water, and we've got regular water, and we're going to use that to clean out our brush. So the very first thing we need is just some water to activate our watercolor. So I'm going to go ahead and put my wet brush into the brown paint. And remember, we're doing wet on dry paper. And I don't want to smash my brush. I'm being really gentle. And the watercolor paper is really going to soak up that paint. Now, if you want a darker brown, all you need to do is pick up more of your paint. What happens is watercolor, when there's more water, it's lighter. When there's less water, it's darker. So you can kind of see the difference right there. This lighter color had more water, this darker color had less water. I just want you to be really gentle when you are using your brush. Aim for your best to keep the paint out of your chameleon. If it does get in your chameleon, it's not really a big deal. And if it does get outside of the lines, it's not a big deal. Just aim for your best. So go nice and slow. So I'm going to continue with the brown of my branches, and then I'll show you how to clean your brush and change colors. One really good tip or trick for watercolors is if you're starting to paint and your paint is kind of getting a little scratchy, which means not a lot of paint's coming off, that just means you need more water. So you just need to dip your brush into a little bit more water, grab some more paint, and then it will have a smoother brush to work with. Watercolor should always glide on really easily, and if it doesn't, it means that you just need more water on your brush. So now that I'm finished with the brown, I need to clean my brush, and you clean your brush the same way that you use regular paint. So first we want to get all of that extra paint off our brush, and I'm using the messy mat for that. I'm still really gentle with my brush. Then I'm going to move on to the sponge to get any extra brown that I still might have off, and then I can get fresh new water. Now, one of my favorite things about watercolor paint is how fun it is to blend colors, and you can blend colors right on the paper. So for example, on my leaves, I want to do a bit of a yellow-green color. So I'm going to start with my yellow paint. I'm going to lay my yellow right on top of my leaf. And the key is that while it's still wet, I can blend colors into that. So I can't take my yellow and go right into my green. I still need to wipe my brush. So I'm going on my messy mat first, and then I'm going onto the sponge, getting fresh water. I'm going to go pick up some green. And I can blend that green right into that yellow. And while it's wet, those colors are really going to blend nicely. And I think that when you mix colors, it really gives your project more depth. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing my leaves. One of the most important things to know about watercolor is that when you have two wet areas next to each other, they will bleed together. So you can see that my leaf is really wet right now here, and it's really dry right now here. If I were to start painting my background here, the blue or whatever color I add here is going to automatically mix with that green because they're both wet. They're going to bleed together. So I want to make sure that I'm picking spots that are dry. I can start over here on my background because this is dry. And when you do your background, one fun thing to try is to just blend your colors together. So for example, if I'm going to use some blues and purples in my background, what I can do is I can start with some purple. I'm just going to lay down some purple in the background. I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to go get some blue. And I can just lay those colors right on top of each other and watch them bleed together. And this is going to create a really cool background. So my blues and purples don't have to mix together completely. I can just let them kind of lay next to each other and mix on their own. And it's going to give me a really fun background. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to my whole background. One of my favorite things about watercolor is the fact that it can look really watery and blurred. You can always go back in and add more water to blend your colors. And one thing that I kind of like is when it accidentally, I like it when the colors accidentally bleed together. So for example, right here, my blues and my purples started mixing into my green leaf, and I just love the way that that looks. And some people, it bothers them, but I really think it adds layers to your project. So like the green kind of blended over here, and that's okay because we still have our black outline to give us the fine details of our project. Now we're not going to do anything to our chameleon until step 2. So this is the end of our background.